Good morning, everyone. My name is Samir Savani. I'm the Head of Innovation and Engineering at ADS, and welcome to this AGP webinar, Aerospace Growth Partnership webinar called Clean Flight, which will focus on the path to zero emissions aircraft. Throughout the AGP webinar series, and indeed the wider FIA Connect events, some of the topics you'll hear about today and will be discussed do dive into more detail through those other sessions, so I welcome you to join those other sessions as well. But this event will focus on the strategic nature of the response needed from UK aerospace and aviation to meet its net zero goals. So we know the environmental impact of aviation is in sharper focus today than it ever has been. It is without doubt the driving consideration for our industry today and for the foreseeable future. It's clear that the current trajectory of aviation emissions, although decoupled in growth from the growth in passenger numbers, is not immediately heading towards net zero 2050. There is clear buy-in from across the UK aerospace and aviation industry who agree that this is the key challenge to overcome if the industry is to have a bright future. That agreement can be seen through the commitment made in just February this year, when the sector aligned behind the net zero ambition through the Sustainable Aviation Coalition. But COVID has bitten and there is an impact. We see a depressed market, which sees the current global fleet grounded by about 2/3 of what it was. We see severe impacts to technology investment opportunities and funds within aerospace companies. And there are no strong signals at the moment from the market about new aircraft or clean sheet designs to drive that technology race, perhaps that we saw pre-crisis. These are just some of the points our panelists will be discussing today. So without further ado, I'll introduce each one. First of all, we have Dr. Eamon Byrne, Head of Emerging Aviation Technologies at the Department of Transport, Simon Weeks, Chief Technology Officer at the Aerospace Technology Institute, Riona Arrowsmith, Chief Project Engineer, Hybrid Electric Propulsion at Rolls-Royce, Ross Dunn, Chief Technology Officer and Head of Strategy at GKN Aerospace, and last but not least, Glenn Llewellyn, VP Zero Emission Technology at Airbus. So each of the panelists will have an opportunity to introduce themselves as we go through, but I'd like to invite Eamon first to give us an overview from the Department for Transport and the governmental perspective. Eamon, over to you.
Thank you, Samir, and thank you everybody for inviting me to the panel. It's a privilege to sit here with you guys, and FIA is always a big event, so hopefully this year's will be no different. I thought what might be helpful is just reflect on recent events, the state that aviation finds itself in and the challenges that it faces going forward, and then follow that up with the government's commitment to net zero and what that means for aerospace. I think it's been a huge unprecedented period of upheaval. If we think back to one of the biggest events in recent memory, 9/11, and it took months, if not years, for some parts of the industry to fully recover. And just in that, I think IATA estimated that airlines suffered net losses of around about 18 billion in a period of 3 years. And I don't think that this is that this situation that we find ourselves in is any different. In fact, it could even be worse as it's US. I think that knock-on effect to the aerospace sector and aircraft order books, for example, is going to be acutely felt. I think we are just seeing BA announcing early retirements of its 747s at 3 years in advance of when they originally said they do so. So huge changes, and nobody's quite sure what that new normal looks like. And as we talk today, you know, operations are only just starting, and there's hesitancy within the public on travelling. So there's a long way to go before we recover. But what does that mean? I think ministers are under no, they've not changed their ambition when it comes to aviation meeting net zero commitments. And if anything, I think ministers, our Secretary of State in particular, and the PM as well, are really pushing us. This is an unprecedented and an unwelcome situation we find ourselves in, but perhaps it offers some opportunities as well. And we saw recently the PM said, as part of our mission to reach net zero emissions by 2050, we should set ourselves the goal now of producing the world's first zero emission long haul passenger plane. So masses of ambition that I think we need to tap into. I think they see that aviation is a key part to play for the UK's position in the globe and global connectivity. And I think this is one element of it. So there's lots going on in the sector. We are trying to kick off as soon as we can the first meeting of the Jet Zero Council that was announced in early June by the Secretary of State. And this is very much a partnership between industry and government, and bringing them together to drive ambition in the delivery of new technologies and innovative ways to cut aviation emissions. I think at the heart of it will be what the PM has set us this task on, producing the world's first emission long-haul passenger plane. Quite what that looks like and quite how that would be delivered there's a long way to go on that, but it's a very, very clear ambition that they want us to meet. And I think as well as having the decarbonisation benefits that everybody's looking for, what it will do is really support the UK aerospace sector, which is a flagship sector for the UK. So very important there, I think. But there's a whole bunch of other activities happening to combat climate change for aviation, and I don't think anybody is under any illusion that there's one silver bullet. I think this panel is probably likely to discuss the range of technologies that could play a part in this, everything from sustainable aviation fuels to hydrogen to batteries, and the challenges that all of those things pose. But I think I'll stop there as an introduction, and just reiterate that I think ministers are really quite keen to push the ambition, both for aviation and the aerospace sector, which they see as key elements of the UK's future, I think.
So next is Dr. Simon Weeks, Chief Technology Officer of the ATI. Simon.
Thanks, Samir, and yeah, good morning. I'd just like to start out with a little brief background on the ATI, what we are, what we do. Firstly, we're there to lead the UK's National Aerospace Technology Strategy, and alongside that goes the UK's nearly $4 billion National Aerospace R&T programme. That's joint government and industry investment. Today, that's grown to well over 300 R&T projects, over 330 partners, and some 2.6 billion out of that 4 billion budget committed into those projects. And that ranges right from big industry down to small industry, big impactful projects right down to smaller projects, infrastructure, and so on. And today our reach is international, because we have to talk to global aerospace companies who have a presence in the UK. So I'll just spend just a couple of moments talking about our strategy and our vision for the future of aerospace. Really, we see three key things to that, and actually just recognizing that the industry is actually at a very pivotal moment for a number of reasons. There's the ambition to substantially decarbonize, but also COVID-19 has brought in a huge additional complexity. But notwithstanding that, I think our priorities remain the same for the industry. First off, sustainability. We must work towards a more sustainable future. The Prime Minister has set the challenge in the UK for that, for a zero net future for aviation, and we're ready to respond to that challenge. And it'll be a challenge just like getting people to the moon for the first time. So we shouldn't underestimate the scale of that, and it will need a level of government support, the like of which has never been seen before. But we're there to take that forward. Then second after sustainability is mobility. And very much that mantle is being taken forward now in the UK by the Future Flight programme that the ATI initiated. But that's about, how can we utilise the air much better in the future as a means to deliver a whole range of different services. And of course, that needs to be done in a sustainable way right from the outset. And then finally, competitiveness. How through investment in technology can we create a much more competitive industry? Thank you, Samir.
Thanks for that, Simon. I'd like to hand over to Riona from RollsRoyce. Riona?
Thanks, Samir. So at RollsRoyce, we're really focusing on 3 pillars in our journey to net zero emissions. The first pillar is ever increasing efficiency of our gas turbine products, recognizing that they're not going to go away immediately. And a core focus of that is developing our geared turbofan offerings, our high bypass ratio engines, such as ultrafans. The second pillar of our activities focuses on new and novel technologies such as electrification and hydrogen, and really exploring what they can do for us from either an all-electric perspective or a hybrid electric perspective. And the third pillar is about pushing the scalability and availability of sustainable aviation fuels. And I think it goes without saying, but all 3 of those things require greater integration between the propulsion system and the aircraft in future. And so those 3 pillars are really underpinned by that. We have a range of projects and demonstrators in order to develop the technology required to get to a net zero emissions future. Some of those include things like our all-electric flight speed record attempts with our Agile project, projects like Bresson, which we're involved in, a project recently announced with H3PS, and working with Airbus in terms of our eVTOL ambitions in City Airbus. So really, we've got a range of projects and demonstrators looking at everything from the GA market to urban air mobility to the future of regional and beyond. So really looking at the entire range of aerospace that you could think of in terms of greater levels of electrification, bringing hydrogen in, working on developing sustainable fuels. So we have research projects developing sustainable fuels and how you do that with electricity, and looking at how our small modular reactors can be used to provide the electricity required to create sustainable aviation fuels at a scale where it actually makes sense from an affordability perspective for the entire industry.
Thank you, Riona. Russ, review from GKN, please.
So from a GKN Aerospace point of view, I guess we're lucky enough to work with pretty much every large aerospace business around the world, whether as a customer or as a supplier. And that gives us a fairly broad sort of view of the industry and what's going on. And I guess also just to reflect on that from a personal perspective, you know, I love aerospace. I've said it to many people before, and I genuinely think aerospace enriches lives, and it's a fantastic industry to work in. And we are stood here, you know, standing on the shoulders of some amazing giants of the industry, having got us to a point where we've got an amazing industry with an amazing safety record. And I guess our challenge is to move from a situation where, you know, aerospace is amazingly safe for humans, to move towards aerospace also being safe for humanity and having a positive impact on the sustainability agenda. I think there's huge opportunities to tackle exactly that challenge. And if we think about it from a different sort of horizons perspective, most of the fantastic aircraft that are flying out there today are built off of capabilities which are in the order of 10 years old, whether that's in material, process, analytical capabilities, etc. Most of the technologies and the capabilities that were used in developing those is probably somewhere between 5 and 10 years old at least. If you look at the huge advances that have been made in that time, and think about building on those, the amazing research and technology work that's been done both in universities, research centres, partners, etc., around the country and around the world. Even just taking today's state of the art, there's huge advances that we can make in the efficiency of those aircraft. And if you then combine with that the ability to introduce things like sustainable aviation fuels, that is completely possible in a very short period of time. It's about getting the right economic conditions and the right opportunities for the right aircraft and engines to be developed. So I think there's a huge amount that is right there at our fingertips today that we can exploit. And there's also huge advances that you can make beyond that. From a GKN Aerospace point of view, we see SAF as being an important ingredient, but we also see it as only one of the major, but one of the ingredients. Our perspective is that there's further opportunities in the area of hydrogen, whether that's in the combustion space, and some of our engine technologies are definitely suitable and will help to enable that progression from the engine side. But also on the airframe side, significant challenges in introducing hydrogen into an efficient and an affordable technical solution for an aircraft. But also beyond combustion, looking at fuel cells could potentially offer a completely zero emission solution, although from an energy density point of view, potentially limiting to certain sort of size and capacity of aircraft. So if you look across the entire remit, I guess our key message is not one of those individual ingredients will meet the requirements for zero emissions aviation for net zero for 2050. We have to continue to advance technologies and capabilities at the front end. We have to look at things like sustainable aviation fuels, and we also have to look further at newer energy sources such as hydrogen. And both for SAF and hydrogen, yes, there are huge challenges to overcome, but they're all within our grasp on the aircraft and the engine side. But almost equally as important is the infrastructure and the ability to generate green energy in order to enable us to move in those directions. So that's the sort of breadth of challenge, I guess, that we see. But I guess also, just to conclude, I think all of those things are within our grasp. And if you combine the capabilities we've developed with the ability to translate those into new products and technologies, everything is within our grasp. And it's just us, we need to back ourselves, whether it's from a UK perspective or from an industry perspective, to rise to that challenge.
Thank you, Russ. Last but not least, Glenn from Airbus.
Okay, hello, thank you, Samir. So at Airbus, we've been very clear recently that we have the ambition to bring a commercial airliner to market, a zero-emission commercial airliner to market in the early 2030s. And one of the most promising technologies to allow us to do that is hydrogen. And why hydrogen? Mainly because we believe we need to position the aviation industry to be powered by renewable energy. And hydrogen is a very good surrogate for allowing us to do that. It can be produced directly from solar, from wind, and we can then carry that energy on board either in fuel cells or combustion in a gas turbine, or even a hybrid electric combination of the two. And that would allow us to potentially significantly reduce aviation's climate impact. It means that we are talking about making some significant decisions in the 2024-2025 timeframe in terms of the technology choices that we need to make. It means that we need to progress the technology development over the next 4 to 5 years extremely quickly, getting to technology readiness level 6. It means that we need to work beyond the typical aircraft manufacturer borders and work with the automotive industry, who've worked a lot with hydrogen over the last decades. We need to work as well with the space industry, who have used hydrogen for several space applications, and we can benefit from, we need to benefit from in order to accelerate the relevance of this technology for aviation. We also need to work with energy providers, hydrogen providers, and airports, because one of the key challenges in what we're doing is is about bringing hydrogen infrastructure to airports and hydrogen supply at a relevant cost to the airports in the early 2030s timeframe. And that's going to require work starting already today, not just, like I mentioned, in the space of technology development for the aircraft, but also preparing the roadmap for hydrogen introduction at airports. We've already started working with energy providers and airports at what a roadmap could be between now and 2030, starting to bring hydrogen into the airport space to decarbonize ground transportation, tow trucks and buses on the airport side, plus ground logistics trucks and passenger buses on the off-airport side in the time period between 2020 and 2030. That will familiarize airports with hydrogen, and it will start to scale hydrogen usage at airport locations so that we can start to get ready for hydrogen usage on aircraft in the 2030s timeframe. And I guess it's important to emphasize that that infrastructure piece is as important as the aircraft development piece in the roadmap that we're working on and that we need to develop and mature when we start to make technology choices and eventually program launch for this zero-emission aircraft.
Thank you, Glenn, and thank you everybody for some really interesting overviews there. So over to our first question, and I'll probably start off with Russ with a view, because I've seen the GKN view around this before. COVID's impacts run deep. If you can give us a brief overview of what the main changes are to your sustainability plans, how you've had to repivot pre and post crisis when it comes to your sustainability agenda.
So I guess I'll take it at two levels. One from a personal level, my personal sustainability agenda went on pause a little bit with the request from government to participate in the ventilator challenge, which I think also hit a couple of our colleagues certainly in Airbus and Meggitt and a few others who were fully engaged in that same challenge. So I guess our sustainability challenge sort of took a slight pause for a couple of months while we personally got involved in that. I mean, looking forward, I don't know if it really changes the long-term ambition in our business. Our own strategy is clearly focused around some of the key stepping stones that I've already talked about in terms of those core technology improvements, the advances in next generation engine solutions for different alternative fuels, alternative energy sources, hydrogen, as we've spoken about, and Glenn's also mentioned. Our product-oriented strategy remains very much on track. The other elements of our sustainability strategy are clearly relating to how we go about manufacturing product, how we source, how we supply, how we enable our people to work and live in a more environmentally friendly way. All of these ingredients are part of our internal strategy. One of the things I will say, and this is hopefully not to embarrass anyone who would also participate, but one of the fantastic things about working in the sustainability space is that there is a much more open, collaborative, sharing approach to the things that we can all do together. And a great example, Hugh from Meggitt's been very open to share their fantastic sustainability journey that they're on, so we can also learn from that from our perspective. So I think the collaboration that we see in this area, I think we see this as the end justifies and supports the need for us to collaborate and help each other on this journey. And I think that's a great thing to be involved in.
Simon, I can see you nodding along. I wonder if there's been any shift in approach or a re-emphasis of the sustainability agenda as you pivoted through the COVID crisis.
It's quite interesting, actually. If anything, the pace of work around zero net emissions has accelerated that we've been engaged with. So constantly, day in, day out, the ATI, we've all been engaged in those discussions. Also, very obviously, we've been very busy looking and working very closely with colleagues from Bays as to how we can help industry through this time and help them to continue to invest in meaningful research and technology projects, of course, many which will be directed towards achieving zero net emissions in the future. And so, yeah, if anything, the pace of that has accelerated, and the feel of urgency around it, and not only if you like on aircraft level technologies, but starting to get on debates on infrastructure. What infrastructure do we need? And particularly the debate has moved on to with hydrogen. It's what infrastructure do we need there? So all things that need to be bottomed out. And I think we're moving quickly through that.
Thanks, Simon. I wonder if from an Airbus and Rolls-Royce perspective, do you feel that change in pace that Simon's describing?
Yeah, I can jump in here. I think it's really galvanised our ambitions, I would say. I think obviously we had a clear roadmap for electrification beforehand, and really it's just kicked it up a gear. It's in some ways the pandemic has slowed us down. It has been difficult to move people and goods across borders. That has slowed us down in some of our projects, definitely. It has an impact on how we work as well. We've had to work very differently in order to deliver our R&T programs, and we've been rolling out things like Agile quite widely across the organisation, especially within my own team. So working much more like software developers than engineering teams, and so far that's been really successful actually. And we've been able to pivot around things like childcare and illness and holidays and availability of facilities, whether it's our own facilities or our partner facilities. So I think actually that's been quite a positive outcome. We've really showed a different way that we can work and how we can deliver these programs. And I really would say that the pace has definitely picked up. I think you'd maybe expect a bit of a slowdown in terms of a loss of efficiency from everyone working at home. And yeah, there are days when I would love to get everyone in a room together to have a workshop to be able to plan out what we do next. But we've actually showed that we can do that just as effectively over virtual tools as well. And I would say it's been a great leveler working with a global team. I definitely see a huge benefit. The team who usually sit right next to me in the office versus my team that sit in Norway or Indianapolis in the US, there is no difference. Everyone is on the phone. It is a great leveler. So in some ways, I think it's really brought us together, and there are far less divides between everyone in terms of whether you're an engineer, a business leader, program manager, or anything. So I take a lot of positives out of it, and definitely I've seen an increase in pace.
Ross, I noticed you wanted to come in specifically to respond to one of those points.
I guess the other thing I was going to mention, Samir, is I guess we're all facing the same challenges that the reduction in revenues and the reduction, the financial challenges mean then on the amount we can all invest in the key technologies that we're all committed to. I guess the really positive thing though is we've had fantastic support from the ATI and from Bays, to reach out and to say how can we help through this very tricky time. I think that's really, really important that we can continue to get that leverage, because without that support, we won't be able to do as much to make the difference that we need to make.
If I could also just come in there, Samir, on this, I think this is a really interesting question you raise, and something that the Department of Transport is trying to work through with industry is what the future of aviation looks like, and nobody is really quite sure what that new normal will be for the sector, and that obviously has knock-on impact into the aerospace sector, which we're discussing today. I think in terms of net zero and sustainability, we still see that there will be people wanting to travel, people needing to get to places. It's important for the for the UK to have global connectivity, not just for leisure, but for business and exports and connecting to the rest of the world. So those challenges of decarbonising the sector and meeting our net zero commitments still remain, albeit they've been massively impacted, I think, by COVID. But I think just the fact that we are seeing the reaction to COVID bring about things like BA retiring its 747s early and the impact on the order books. It does also mean that airlines are going to start using their more efficient aircraft. So it's going to take a little bit of time for, I think, this to settle down in terms of what we understand the impact of COVID to be on our sustainability agenda. But it does offer us some real opportunity to push on some of the topics that we're discussing today and really drive on the technical aspects of trying to decarbonise aircraft. I think it's a real opportunity as well as a significant impact, and it's up to us to really work collaboratively on how we benefit from that, I think.
Great, thank you. Glenn, do you want to comment on that particular point?
Yeah, I'd just like to talk about sort of pre and post COVID. In January this year, Airbus published its new purpose. The previous one was "We Make It Fly." The updated one since January is "We Pioneer Sustainable Aerospace Solutions for a Safe and United World." And I think it's a very strong message externally and internally about really what we're targeting, both short, medium, and long term. For sure, the COVID crisis has put a massive strain on our business, like some of our colleagues' business. And I'd just like to re-emphasize what Russ said, the support that we get from the different research bodies, ATI in the UK and colleagues across Europe. It's been really fundamental to allow us to accelerate or keep on track our ambitions in this space. So, you know, real big shout out to what's going on in that area for what is being supported. I think it's really important for us. And I think with that kind of public-private partnership, collaborating together, I think definitely we need that to make what is an extremely huge challenge a success.
That's a great segue into the next question, actually, Glenn. So if you can get ready to unmute yourself, this is coming your way. So UK has taken a global leadership position in committing to net zero in terms of legislation, and we can see Europe moving that way through that legislation, and eventually we can see the rest of the world joining forces, for example, through the ICAO LTAG revision of its long-term aspirational goal. But what do we need to do in the UK to make sure that our ambition and that leadership position in driving towards net zero is matched with our leadership position in terms of delivering zero emissions aircraft of the future?
I think investment in the right technologies, the technologies that we are going to need to decarbonize aviation, to make aviation climate neutral. This is going to be key to UK participation in the adventure. In some cases, there are perhaps some technologies that we're pretty sure about, that we're convinced are going to play a role in the future, and there will be others which are still under investigation and we require further work in order to determine if it's the correct pathway or not. And I think it's going to be a mix of certain bets and sometimes uncertain bets which need to be taken. And I think UK is already in an extremely strong position from a technology perspective to help with the overall ambition. I think stating at government level the law is another step in the right direction, and now backing that up with investment in the right technologies to to get us there, I think will put really the UK even more firmly on the map when it comes to zero emission technology.
Russ, Glenn very kind of helpfully mentioned some certain bets and some uncertain bets. Any recommendations as to how we go about making those quite difficult decisions at times?
I guess my view is we've got to prioritise with the end in mind. So if we have a good understanding of where we're trying to get to, I think that ultimately should be driving our decisions. And I think hydrogen, as an example, I know Glenn is a strong advocate, and as am I. I think ultimately, there are some complexities, there are some challenges with those sorts of areas. But I think ultimately it's the solution that enables us to achieve zero emissions at an aircraft level. So I think ultimately we need to make some of those bets. We need to make some investments. Clearly with research and technology there are always uncertainties. But I guess I'm also a big fan of there are less and less uncertainties if we do things properly. I can remember going back many years, being able to predict the aerodynamic flow through across a landing gear was pretty bloody complicated, and you had to make some pretty broad estimates. Nowadays, our level of capability is much, much higher, and our ability to predict, simulate, anticipate is much, much higher. And therefore, the level of risk and uncertainty that we take from the design phase into the manufacturing, assembly, and validation phase is clearly lower. So there are complexities, but I don't see them as being necessarily like a spread betting across multiple risk areas. I see it as we need to make some prioritised decisions and back ourselves in solutions which get us towards the end we're trying to achieve.
Thanks for that, Russ. Good question for Simon, really following on from that. I mean, the UK's often been criticised in terms of not being able to pick winners. Is there a decision-making process or an analysis process within the ATI where you're able to kind of balance the investment across this plethora of technology and solutions that are being sought to make sure we are investing in the right ones at the right levels and, of course, at the right time?
Samir, yes. I'd say the very fact that the ATI exists was about the government deciding on sectors that needed to come through and needed to be supported because they were real pillars of the economy. And the capability that we've got within the ATI and our ability to work across industry and academia to pull in a whole range of views and work with government is absolutely key to teasing out where the key things are to work on. And again, I think others have said it. There's no magic bullet here. You need to work across the board. Air transport is a very complex system of systems, to coin a term, and everything needs to work well together, and the energy supply into it needs to work as well. So it's a much, much bigger picture to actually achieve zero emissions. ATI is right in the midst of that, working, yes, from the technology front, but also with policymakers as well. And what we need to see is consistent policy. This is a long-term game, and I think it's a problem we can all agree on, isn't it? That we need to fix the sustainability of aerospace together, and it'll take us a time to get there. Let's be consistent in policy, in the way we support it, funding-wise. Also bringing through the technology from universities. We need universities and the system supporting academia to work in a different way than it has done before, to have a much longer term view, a more strategic approach to the problem.
Thanks. Riona, Russ mentioned the ability to take risks in particular ways, which is much more analysis-led. Simon mentioned just how complex the aerospace and aviation system of systems is, and you mentioned how you're trying to roll out Agile across your business. how's that going with what is traditionally quite a slow-moving sector, perhaps more favouring waterfall approaches to risk management? How have you found the rollout of Agile, and how can that help?
Yeah, so I think that we've used a combination of both. So that doesn't mean that waterfall risk management goes away. There's still definitely a place for that. There's still a place for the well-known and loved engineering V in terms of design and validation. I think it's really Agile has its place, and I think there's this constant tension between being bold, learning by doing, failing fast, and also in aerospace, where we're looking at, how can you design a product that will be safe and last for 30 years plus. So how do you get it right first time? There's this constant tension between failing fast, doing something bold, failing fast, and getting things right first time. And I think that that's the thing that we often wrestle with in R&T. And I think what we've tried to do is combine the two approaches where, especially in our electrification journey, we've been learning by doing. We've got a lot of programs and demonstrators on which teach us something. Every single one of them teaches us something. And then we take that and we put that forward into getting our first product right first time. So I'd say it's balancing the two. I don't think you can. Well, I guess there's definitely something to be said for taking either one approach. Lots of startups operate in an agile way and fail fast, and are quite successful in doing that and become huge companies from doing that. And I guess it's knowing what methodology to apply at what time to give you the results that you need. So in terms of looking at the portfolio of technologies that we need for a net zero carbon aviation future, I think some of these technologies we're just going to have to be bold and try and push things on as quickly as we can, and if we fail, learn from it and push that into where we go next. Like Glenn said, some of these technologies are more sure and some of them are less sure, but I don't think that means that we shouldn't sufficiently investigate all of these technologies. I don't think the future is a one-size-fits-all for all aircraft types in the way that we've got gas turbines today. The whole industry has really converged on a certain solution. The biggest difference, I guess, we're looking at is it a prop or a fan, these kind of things. I think in the future we've got a whole range of a portfolio of technologies, some which might apply better to smaller aircraft and some which might better suit larger aircraft. And then perhaps over time we'll see the industry converge again, but I'm quite excited by the divergence because it means that we've got lots of avenues to go and chase and lots of things to investigate and opportunities around us in a way that we haven't seen for quite some time with our traditional gas turbine and tube and wing aircraft.
Thank you for that, Rihanna. I guess that kind of diversity of approach and the range of technologies we're going to invest in lends itself to kind of a more specific area. I want to talk a little bit about sustainable aviation fuels. I think we all agree that SAFs are an essential part of the mix in terms of delivering short-term carbon gains, while longer-term technologies are matured, including next generation of SAF, hydrogen, etc. Just wanted to probe the panelists in terms of where they sit within that future fuel mix. There is the debate raging at the heart of industry at the moment as to what that future fuel mix might be. Really interesting to hear Glenn's views around the pivot towards hydrogen, which I know already what GKN are developing. So I'd like to sort of run through the panel in terms of what you see as the future mix of fuels, both in the short term as well as in the longer term. I'll start with Glenn.
Yeah, sure. So already today's aircraft aircraft in service are certified to carry up to 50% of sustainable aviation fuel on board. That's a huge lever which today we're not adequately using in reducing aviation's CO2 emissions. And most of that is down to cost for sustainable aviation fuel. And I think we need to bring down the cost, and we need to incentivize the use of sustainable aviation fuel in service. So that's the first point, and it's something which is relatively short term that we can do. There is no technology limit, there's no technology boundary in us being able to do more there. The aircraft are already certified. Then we know that at some point we will reach a scalability limit of the current generation of biofuel. So we therefore need more investment, more effort on the synthetic fuel pathway, pathways like power to liquid synthetic fuel. And what's interesting with that is that power to liquid synthetic fuel has basically two components. One component is hydrogen, and the other component is CO2, carbon. It's a hydrocarbon. And you combine these different molecules in a Fischer-Tropsch process, and this essentially creates a power to liquid synthetic fuel, which can be completely carbon neutral. We believe that it is highly scalable, and we believe that sustainable aviation fuel, including synthetic fuel, has a bright future. It's not competing with hydrogen. We need it, and we need hydrogen, let's say raw hydrogen usage on board aircraft. Synthetic fuel, sustainable aviation fuel can be dropped into existing aircraft. So the 20,000 or so aircraft that are already in service can use that fuel tomorrow if we were to provide it to them. And as I said earlier, that's a huge lever for reducing aviation CO2 emissions that can be achieved in the short term. In the longer term, there will still be a need for sustainable aviation fuel. Hydrogen looks like it's very attractive from the sort of 4-passenger vehicle, maybe up to 200 passenger aircraft. And then after that sort of size and with the longer ranges, it's at least in the medium term likely that power to liquid synthetic fuel or sustainable aviation fuel would be the best option. So long range flights, even in 2050, there is the jury is, I would say, still out somewhat, because there's a lot of work to be done on hydrogen technologies, which could change the picture. But at least with today's perspective, long range aircraft in 2050 are likely to still be using sustainable aviation fuel, and power to liquid synthetic fuel being a major part of that, given the scalability that pathway would provide the industry.
Understood, thank you. And Rihanna, I wonder if there's a couple of views from you, because obviously the drop-in solution is for the here and now, but as new engines become available, could they be certified for a different kind of fuel? Where do you sit on the hydrogen versus e-fuel debate?
Yeah, I think just really echo what Glenn says, really. I think at least in the short term, we've demonstrated that we can run the majority of our engines completely on 100% sustainable aviation fuel. We've done this test to our Trent 7000, our Trent XWB, absolutely can take those drop-in fuels. So we could start using those tomorrow, no problem. Obviously, hydrogen needs a bit more work if you want to burn that in a gas turbine in terms of combustor design. That's one thing that we're looking at, but equally looking at hydrogen fuel cells and seeing where they come out in terms of energy density versus batteries. So I think that it would be easy to think that it's a either or, and I think it's not. I think it's both, and it's both on a time scale, and maybe one replaces the other over time. but like Glenn said, we need to see where the technology can really, well, not where the technology can go, where we can push the technology to, and really create the drive for it in the industry, like we've seen for electrification in automotive. We as the industry, and with support of organisations like the ATI and the UK government, we really need to push this forwards and really show that we need this in aerospace, rather than just waiting to see what happens in other industries in order to leapfrog off that.
Yeah, and bearing in mind, we've got government colleagues online. I'm wondering if there's an initial response from our from Eamon in terms of the kind of range of views that you've heard, particularly around the need to have that multi-pronged approach to fuels, and we're, you know, the industry not really being in a position to decide which particular track to go down. So we have to invest along all of those lines, and whether there's a role here for government to respond to that challenge and support those full range of solutions as industry goes on that journey.
Thanks, Samir. I think most definitely nobody's under the illusion that there's one technology that is going to solve the net zero challenge that we've set ourselves. Fuels has a big part to play, and that's sustainable aviation fuels. And I think there's an acceptance, I think, amongst the industry that that's probably the short term, the most immediate technology that we could pick up and run with in the earlier years, before we begin to see technologies such as electrification and hydrogen, which are perhaps more medium longer term. So I think there's a long way to go on both, and alongside the Jet Zero Council, which I think is going to really look at how we might deliver on these things. We are still planning to consult on the government's position on aviation and climate change later on this year, which I hope will then tease out the specific role that SAF can play, sustainable aviation fuels can play alongside all these other technologies. But I think it's a real interesting and challenging space that we find ourselves in, and it's nobody quite knows the relativeness of each of those technologies in how they're going to play out in helping us decarbonize the sector. So there's a long way to go, but lots of ambition on all fronts, I think.
So I'm going to ask everyone a little bit of an unfair question. We've got COP26 coming up here in the UK. If very briefly you could make a moonshot announcement as the Prime Minister, the UK is going to be challenged with setting out its eco-credentials at that global conference. What is it that you would say with the Prime Minister's hat on? I'll start with Ross, I think.
So I guess if I was Prime Minister for the day, and my decisions couldn't be overturned the next day, I would probably, I think ultimately the UK has a fantastic heritage of aerospace capability, and I think we have an opportunity with quite a different, outlook of technologies and capabilities in the future to reposition ourselves and to confirm our position as a major aerospace business, country in the future by putting our best foot forward on a fully net zero aircraft solution. Now, whether that's a demonstrator or a fully industrial solution, I think we've got capabilities in the country that could be translated into, a fantastic example of a zero-emission aircraft. And I think whether it's, I know Boris has used the terms jet zero, or whether it's really a jet or whether it's something different. For me personally, it would be at the smaller end first. In the regional sort of space, we could really demonstrate what those capabilities can offer, and position UK as a continued major player in the aerospace industry.
Great, thank you, Riona. If you were wearing the Prime Minister's hat and had a soundbite to launch at COP26 around aviation, what would it be?
I think in some ways, I think we've already seen very positive moves from what the Prime Minister has announced already. I guess it would just to go deeper on that and further into committing investment to sustainable aviation in the UK and supporting industry and academia to do that. So I don't know. I think I'm already very excited about the things that have previously been announced by Boris. So I think in some ways you can be quite proud of what he's already said. I think it's just following through and committing to that and holding our politicians to their promises. So I guess, yeah, I would like him to say that he is still committed and and that's what I would say if I was Prime Minister tomorrow. I would just reconfirm and demonstrate the commitment through investment in real tangible projects and technology.
Great, thank you for that, Rihanna. And Glenn, from your perspective, clearly Airbus, from a UK perspective, would love to be a major player in future programs. What would you like to see?
So if I was Prime Minister at COP26, I'd make lots and lots of announcements. But if I had to choose two, I would probably ramp up massively renewable energy and hydrogen production to decarbonize lots of industries, including aviation, including synthetic fuel, and including hydrogen usage for aircraft in its raw form. And I would position the UK to take advantage of the products which are going to be zero emission in the future by investing in technologies and massively in technologies. We need, as Airbus, the best solutions in the world. We're in a global market. We sell to a global market. We are in a global competition. And so we need the UK, as we do our entire ecosystem, to be producing the best technology in the world.
Amen.
Oh, great question, this, Samir. I think we have a great opportunity. This country has a phenomenal aerospace sector, and I think we have to build on that. And I agree with some of the comments that others have had. I think for me, this comes back to actually the really challenging ambition the PM has set around a first zero emission long haul passenger plane. I think we've got the capability for that. I think we've got the capacity for that in the UK. We're uniquely positioned in many respects to be able to deliver on that, and I think we should really try and be ambitious and deliver against that. I think that would be my slingshot. I think Simon makes a really good point on here around actually, in order to do that, we need consistent policy and huge collaboration. I think this is the thing that the UK does really well, is collaborate. And I think whatever that slingshot is, or that moonshot, I think the collaboration is key to that. And we have some great organisations and some great aerospace sector organisations in the UK. And if we work together, we can achieve anything, quite frankly.
Well, time has flown, and I'm sorry that we have to kind of curtail the set of questions. I'll try my best to kind of summarize some of the key points. Started right at the top. We're in a fantastic industry, which has served human beings for a really long time. And I like Ross's words, it's now time to not just serve human beings, but actually serve humanity and make sure we take away the negative impacts of our industry on the planet. Simon very helpfully mentioned it's a balance between sustainability and competitiveness, and it's not a trade-off between them. We actually need to hit both of those really hard to make sure we're hitting those sustainability targets, but also have the industry right here in the UK to do so. Broadly, everybody agrees there's no silver bullet. We need to invest in many of these promising solutions as possible, ranging from technologies to fuels, as well as wider levers such as clean energy sources. We've seen some ambitious statements made from airlines, from aircraft manufacturers, and even the Prime Minister around zero emissions aircraft. possibly as early as the 2030s. That's really ambitious and certainly really exciting for the future of the industry. And really the last message I really wanted to cover was, I asked you all the question as how much COVID has bite, and it has hurt the industry. But it's really heartening to see that it hasn't changed your long-term sustainability plans. If anything, it's galvanized the ambition within your companies, within the wider industry, within the wider sector, and that can only really bode well for the future of the industry. Thank you all for your time.